This is the Week in Sustainability from Workiva Carbon, formerly Sustain Life. It's where our team of experts and practitioners share weekly insights and commentary to keep you up to date about all things sustainability.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another Week in Sustainability. I'm Hannah Zofsky, a sustainability analyst on our team here at Workiva Carbon. Last week, we were focused on the Gulf of Mexico and some major storms in the southeast corner of the United States. So today we're going to jump over to the northwest corner and talk about one very consequential ballot measure in the state of Washington. And you may not be in Washington, you may not even be in the United States. So why does this matter? The United States is a huge emitter. Its emissions trajectory is consequential for the rest of the globe. And even more so, the quiet and not so quiet strategies used by business interests and most specifically fossil fuel interests to transition away from fossil fuels on a state and federal level. They're not just happening in Washington. What's going on in Washington is a really good example of dynamics playing out elsewhere. So what does the Climate Commitment Act do, and why are people aiming to repeal it? The Climate Commitment Act launched in 2023. It targets businesses that emit 25,000 or more metric tons of CO2 each year. And that pool of businesses that emit that much every year, that covers about 75% of the state's emissions. So what this program does is it sets an emissions cap, which creates a pool of allowances, one allowance being 1 metric ton of carbon or of CO2e, and businesses purchase allowances that enable them or really earn them the ability to emit X amount of CO2e over that next year. And the allowances shrink over time in keeping with our IPCC and SBTI backed target trajectory. So the Climate Commitment Act is written to meet what we actually need to do in order to prevent warming from escalating beyond 1.5 degrees C, which means slashing reductions by 45 to 50% by 2030, and then continuing on to meet net zero ambitions by 2050. It requires money and time to succeed. And, since businesses are a really huge piece of the puzzle here, they're big emissions contributors, and it makes sense to structure a policy that allows them to bankroll mitigation. And since launching in 2023, this program has been a massive success. It's brought in $2 billion of revenue. And those $2 billion have gone towards a huge list of mitigation and adaptation projects. So just to name a few, they've retrofitted low-income households and small businesses. These are often old leaky buildings. They've retrofitted with heat pumps and electrifying a lot of appliances. They've also electrified the state ferry system. They've also electrified school buses. And then they've also subsidized public transportation for riders younger than 18. Continued funding and larger success of this program could mean expanding that to all riders. They've also improved urban tree canopies and reduced the health risks of urban heat islands. This policy focuses and targets business emissions, but the revenue generated from it supports robust resilience strategies for everyone. So, Washington isn't doing anything groundbreaking here. Cap and trade dynamics dominate the European car market. In the US specifically, New York is standing up a similar program. California's cap and trade program has brought in $20 billion since 2022, or not since 2022, but as of 2022. And the thesis is consistent. Businesses are pursuing operational decarbonization within their own boundaries. But there are a ton of public projects that need funding in addition to business decarbonization. These cap and invest programs, they motivate businesses to reduce their own emissions because then they don't need to pay for as many allowances the next year. And they also use that revenue to meaningfully contribute to projects outside of their own boundaries. So again, these policies work. But of course, not everyone sees it that way. And, what are the criticisms of this? Why is there an effort to repeal? And who's driving that? It's the same criticism that we see of pretty much all climate action. Increased energy prices are at the center of criticism. And the logic looks like, businesses are having to pay more to continue their typical operations. that hits consumers directly at the pump, but it also sort of spreads across inflation. But looking at who's saying this is important here, a political action committee called Let's Go Washington has led this campaign. They're behind the effort to repeal. Let's Go Washington is bankrolled almost entirely by one hedge fund manager from California. And he alone has spent $6 million getting 3 different ballot measures on the Washington ballot this election cycle. But we don't have the time to go through each of the 3 that he's supporting. We also don't have time to cover the thousands of dollars that Let's Go Washington in fines that Let's Go Washington has encountered for campaign finance mismanagement. But focusing on their goals to repeal the Climate Commitment Act, their efforts walk the line of misinformation, frankly. Have gas prices gone up in Washington in the last year? Yes. But the Climate Commitment Act is not to blame. They've fluctuated nationally. Gas prices in Washington peaked before allowances were even up to auction. And since allowances have been up to auction February of 2023, prices have decreased. So, of course, their position and the threat of increased prices like riles an aversion to price increases, but it's not reflective of reality. And even if it were reflective of price reality, gas prices are always volatile. And to pretend that this singular state level law is at fault for the entire, or to pretend that this state level law is at fault and ignore the entire geopolitical context that makes up a gas price formula, it's condescending to voters, and it's a misrepresentation of the dynamic. The PAC's website doesn't provide their sources for these claims, while the State Department is like constantly combating them with multiple external economic analyses, proving that they are not to blame for the price increase that Washington citizens have felt. But the ballot measure also, it doesn't just stop at repealing the Climate Commitment Act. It prohibits the state from imposing any cap and tax, cap and trade, cap or invest mechanism. And this is where it's important to remember the consequences of climate change, disaster damage, health impacts of pollution, loss in green spaces. These are all externalities of fossil fuel consumption to begin with, and we're all already paying for them. The absence of a cap and invest system doesn't protect consumers. It protects businesses that have contributed to the problem, and it protects them from contributing to the solution. Repealing the Climate Commitment Act, it would set Washington back. We've already established their targets are good. Their targets are in line with what science says we need. It also ties the hands of legislators from creating solutions. Legislators that are trying to solve problems for their constituents have significantly less options if this is to go through. And as the U.S. election approaches, we're going to hear these themes again and again. The primary attack to climate action is always going to be what it costs today. It's always going to ignore the much more costly consequences of doing nothing. And PACs like Let's Go Washington, they can rhetorically appeal to low-income communities, but they are dismantling the exact systems that all of us are going to need as climate change worsens. So, as always, take a look at the initiatives that are on your ballot this election season. Don't wait until you're in the booths to think about them. Look into and pay attention to who got them on the ballot. And early voting is open in a lot of states. So if you want to skip a line, good that out.
Workiva Carbon provides organizations with an easy-to-use solution to manage the full life cycle of measuring, managing, and reporting carbon emissions. Now integrated into the same platform used to manage the world's most trusted financial and non-financial reporting. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this show on our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast platform. See you next week.